Start out by showing you the principal difference between the two rigs. One, a Mylar sail, fully battened rig, hung on a flexible carbon fiber mast, and the other, a Dacron sail, straight leach batten, hung on an aluminum stiff spar. After that, we'll concentrate exclusively on the C2 and how it is configured. The C2 rig is very much more easily depowered, and because of that we are able to put more area up high in the sail, as that is the part of the sail which is depowered first. And you can see that all of this area here represents extra roach up high, and on the front of the sail there's extra luff curve because the mast is more flexible, and we have to have more luff round in the sail to accommodate the curve in the mast. Notwithstanding all of that, and the fact that this sail is about 10% larger in actual area, not measured area, than the standard sail, it still is very much more easily depowered and very much more easily hiked flat. It should also be noticed that whether the batten is very stiff or very thin, at this stage it would make absolutely have no effect on the shape of the sail. It would still be flat. I'm often asked about the effect of batten tension and what it does to a sail, how tight should it be, how loose should it be, and the answer is that this sail has been designed so that the batten is in a passive state. What it means is that when it's tension, it's holding the back of the sail away from the front, but it's not under tension. If you decide to tension the batten by unscrewing the back, you start to put a load on the sail, and when you do that, the sail starts to have a shape which is not built into the sail, and it's a result of the fact that the batten is in a pocket that can move, and it ends up flipping to one side of the pocket and creating the shape that you see in the sail here. I'll just increase that a little bit more. You'll notice quite a bit of shape has been introduced into the sail. The corollary to this is that once that shape has been put in the sail by the sailor, that shape will remain in the sail. And it's not something which, when you depower the boat, it's suddenly going to disappear. So, yes, you can power up the sail with the batten by doing exactly what I've done here, but if you're light and do that and you're caught in a breeze, that power is going to stay in the sail in the form of camber that you will not get rid of. All the battens are now in the sail, and you'll notice that there is a bend that has been induced in the mast, and it tends to be higher up than lower down, and that's because the most flexible part of the mast is up at the top. This shape is not a result of the batten. This shape is a result of the material that was lying here being pushed back into the sail and forming the shape which you now see. We're going to be referring to the depth of a sail, and the depth of the sail is a measure of how deep, how much of a bend there is in the batten at any one point. Just as we saw when the sail was on the ground and we saw a bend induced in the mast, as we hoist the sail up the mast, you'll notice that the further up it gets, the more and more bend gets induced into the mast, until finally, when it's all the way up, you'll notice that the maximum bend is up in the top section of the spar because that's the most flexible. This is not a mast pre-bend. This is a bend induced in the mast. It's a bend in the rig as a result of the batten pressure against the bolt rope track on the mast. It is not pre-bend in the spar. When hoisting the sail, it's very important that we get the sail right to the top of the carbon. If the sail is not all the way up, we are going to lose the same amount down at the tack, and for every inch we lose here, we lose it at the tack, and that's 1 inch less of Cunningham that we're able to put on the bottom of the sail. By experience, this is the best possible solution. You tie a single overhand knot, pass it through the sail, then another single-handed knot back on itself, and then hoist all the way. In order to keep the stretch to a minimum, we've positioned this cleat as high as possible while still making it fairly easy to undo from the deck. The higher the cleat, the further forward the sailor has to be to undo it. The further down the cleat, the longer the piece of line and the greater the stretch. If you consider the mast being approximately 12 feet, a 1% stretch in that is nearly 1.5 inches. A 1% stretch in this is millimeters. The essential part of sailing any single-hander is being able to depower the sail. The sails are cut with a lot of luff round. The sails are full. They need to be full for off-wind performance. They need to be full for light air performance. But in a heavy air, that shape has to be flattened. And the only way to do it is to bend the mast. And here is the principal difference between the C2 and the standard rig. And the standard rig, of course, has a radial mast, and the two depower completely differently. I'm going to start with the C2. I've hooked up the halyard to the Cunningham, and I'm going to demonstrate that it's possible to bend the mast simply by putting a compression load in the mast, and I'm using the Cunningham to do it without the sail. So as I pull that on, you'll see the mast starting to bend, bending more, and eventually we have a large bend in the mast which is equal to or greater than the luff round which was on the sail, which is the curve with the white bolt rope that you saw in some of the earlier shots. You'll notice that there is more bend up top than there is down low, and that's because of the extreme flexibility of the top mast. That is there so that the top of the mast starts to bend first, and as it bends, it starts depowering the top of the sail, and it depowers progressively from the top down to the bottom. This is very, very important. If you simply bend a mast in the middle, the whole leech will open. But if you can do it at the top first, you start spilling the top, then you get lower, and this way, the most difficult part to hike against, which is the top of the sail, it's the maximum lever on you, is opened and depowered first. And that's what the C2 does. Now we're going to move over to the Bight standard rig. This is the standard Bight mast, and it is in fact a radial mast. The radial mast was designed by me some 25 years ago, and this mast is exactly the same mast, only it's been in the Bight for 18 years. When the masts were done 25 years ago, the mast was considered to be a fairly flexible mast. This mast is no longer considered a flexible mast. In fact, it is a very stiff mast by today's standards. I'm going to try and bend it using the Cunningham attached to the halyard, the same way I did the C2 mast, and you're going to see that no matter what you do, this mast cannot be bent from the front end. It has to resort to bending with the leech, which we'll show after. And I'm going to load up the mast And you'll notice that we're not getting the response from this mast that we got from the C2. The reason? The mast is just too stiff. And no amount of compression load put in it will induce the kind of bend that is induced in the C2. Moreover, if you try and do it with the Cunningham, it's the cloth in the sail that ends up inducing the load in the mast, and we're going to see very shortly that the cloth in the bight sail or in a radial sail, the Dacron, cannot carry the load of the Cunningham the same way that the C2 can. The next best is to go from the front of the sail and now move to the back of the sail. In other words, we can't do it with the luff of the sail, so we have to bend the mast with the leech of the sail. And in order to approximate that, I've attached the main halyard to the back, and this takes the place of the leech. And by pulling now on the main sheet or on the bang will do exactly the same thing. We're now able to induce a bend in the mast, but you'll note that it's an even bend. In fact, because the section at the top is parallel, the last 3 or 4 feet are almost straight. And the maximum bend occurs almost precisely in the middle of the mast.